Everyone thought I was moving in the wrong direction, but I knew there was no other direction that I could move. These feelings that the world's going to press back on you when you start to share these things. People in my actual life, and when they were like, "What are you doing?" A lot of times when people talk about their spiritual awakening, there's usually a big catalyst event that happens that propels them into this new understanding of themselves and the world around them. The big catalyst that I really had was when I decided that I needed to leave the marriage that I was in. That was a part of my journey where I accepted the guidance that I was receiving, because I've been receiving it all along, but I was ignoring it. I think the biggest thing is understanding that you're always exactly where you're meant to be. So wherever you are in this process of awakening and understanding yourself and understanding your purpose, let go of any guilt and shame about not doing it fast enough. Because while we have the opportunity to make different decisions, a lot of our lives do have these fated points, and you're meant to move in a certain progression because everything is connected and it's so complex. Well, the funny thing is like from a medical perspective, like we understand that the physical eye can only see so much of the spectrum of light. We understand that there's things that our physical eye cannot see. And so why is it so hard for us to accept that our brain can't fully see everything that this world holds?
Do you have a special ritual that you do before you start sharing a message or appearing on a podcast or writing your book? Is there something that you do to prepare?
I don't necessarily prepare, but I do settle into my own energy, because anything that I share, I want to make sure that the frequency is the highest available frequency um, for the intended recipient of the messages. And so I usually just settle into my own energy, remove any thoughts or feelings from any like personal stuff from the day, and I just kind of drop into that space.
I personally have benefited so much from your experience. I went through a year of just major changes in my life. I'm a clinical person. I work in a cath lab. I do very evidence-based medicine. And over the last year and a half, my worldview has just expanded. And it wasn't by seeking, it was literally just by being in that experience of taking care of patients in the cath lab, meeting people synchronistically, being asked the right questions at the right time. And then I found you, and your messages just really clicked in my mind. And I think if I found them a year before, I probably wouldn't have understood a lot of what you were sharing. But now it's almost like I feel like I can breathe when I hear your messages because it validates what I already know inside. And so, would you mind introducing yourself to us?
Yeah, absolutely. I am Dr. Claudia Thompson. I have a PhD in physical activity, nutrition, and wellness, and I'm a registered dietitian. So I come from the research based, evidence based practice when it comes to wellness and health, and taking care of your body in every way that we can do so physically. Um, and I had a similar process where I woke up through that analytical mind myself. And yeah, so I've just embraced my gifts, and I help others connect with their authentic self in a way that allows them to move through the world in a way that helps them fulfill their mission and purpose while they're here.
I think your work is so powerful. And I think for a lot of us kind of going through this process of awakening or realizing that our consciousness and the way that we exist within the world may be more than what we initially thought, I think seeing someone like you share in such an open-hearted and pure way makes us feel empowered to, one, embrace that process and journey. And I think, two, also openly share our experiences. And so Open Heart was really created from this ripple effect of people like you who really were important parts of my own journey. And my first question to you is, what is an awakening for those in our audience who may not be familiar with terms like spiritual awakening? What would you describe that as?
An expansion of understanding, I think, is the best way to put it, because there's different levels. Like it happens over time, and it can happen very slowly, and then parts of it can happen very quickly. And so a lot of times when people talk about their spiritual awakening, there's usually a big catalyst event that happens that propels them into this new understanding of themselves and the world around them. But there were also a lot of like mini awakenings that happened prior to even allow that to happen. So it's more of a unmasking of the limitations and energies and lessons that are placed upon us when we come here, and becoming more connected with who you actually are.
That is such a beautiful explanation, and I think a lot of us can relate to that experience. Do you mind if it's, only if you're comfortable with it? I would love to hear a little bit about your experience of awakening, because you also have this background in a very rigid scientific field. And to see what you've built now is just incredible. And I think that's another part of your journey that really resonates with me. I also come from a very scientific background, and I feel like I'm in these very early stages of discovering and expanding. So do you mind sharing with us how that process unfolded?
Yeah, absolutely. I also want to share with you that it's really normal at the stage where you are, where you're just becoming comfortable talking about these things, that it's normal to be nervous. It's normal to have these feelings that the world's going to press back on you when you start to share these things. Because I went through the same thing. Like the first time I shared a channeled message, I was thoroughly convinced that everyone was going to think I was crazy. And then I was terrified that the people from my PhD program and everything else were going to see these things and judge me really heavily for it. But my process of awakening happened, there were a lot of those smaller pieces that opened up in me over many, many years. And the big catalyst that I really had was when I decided that I needed to leave the marriage that I was in. That was a part of my journey where I accepted the guidance that I was receiving, because I'd been receiving it all along, but I was ignoring it. And so I went ahead and moved forward with that decision and upended my entire life in that. And through that process, I really shed away everything that wasn't me. And that allowed me to open up to my actual true self.
Wow. And it often is through really painful experiences, right? That awakening kind of unfolds. And
Yeah, because I mean, that was a catalyst. And then I had a friend that passed away, and that was like one of the first people that I communicated with clearly, in that other realm. And so
when you say that, I get goosebumps.
the spiritual tinglies that give you that confirmation that that's truth. Because I think a lot of times we get those body signals too, that share what is true energetically. But that process of going through like massive change is really what drives us forward. It's the catalyst that pushes us into those energies that are more authentic.
Today's episode is supported by Don't Miss a Beat, beautifully designed educational manuals for the cardiac cath and EP labs.
I created Don't Miss a Beat for healthcare workers who want support without judgment, to feel seen, guided, and encouraged no matter where they're starting from. These books are my way of reaching the people I can't touch directly, meeting them where they are instead of talking over them so no one feels alone in the learning process.
Thank you to Don't Miss a Beat for supporting Open Heart and empowering the next generation of healers. Now, back to our show. I really love hearing your story, and I appreciate you sharing that because I can relate to that so much on so many different levels. I think I first started kind of thinking like, oh, what is going on in the cath lab? Because I was taking care of really sick patients. And of course, they come in sets of 3, very similar presentations, and all had very similar stories of what happened to them when they had cardiac arrest. And as I was at the table, you're moving so fast that I almost felt like it's not really me. I felt like a conduit. I'm like literally plugged into something, somewhere, some source, and it's just flowing through me. And the first time I said the word channeling, I didn't even really know what channeling was, but I felt like, man, I feel something other than my own energy, but it feels good and it feels like it's helpful. And the first time I said that out loud, I was just like, people are going to think I'm totally insane. And I also had big experiences where I met people out in the world that I never would have expected to run into, who showed up at a time in my life when I really needed to be asked certain questions of why do you live the way that you live? Why do you believe what you believe? And it created a shift in me to the point where I could walk away from a lot of things that look very stable on paper, but didn't feel right to me as a person. And so very much relatable. Whenever you have clients who are going through the spiritual awakening process, what do you tell them to be able to navigate the space? Because it can be very dark. It can be very isolating when we have the ego death and the dark night of the soul, all of those experiences. What is your advice to people who go through that part of life?
I think the biggest thing is that they're not alone. You're never alone. And those spaces can feel very lonely, very isolating, like you said. Most of my clients are going through big changes. And a lot of them have very stable exteriors. You know, they're high achievers. They move in places and spaces in our like 3D physical world that is not easy to achieve in. And so those places and spaces, they have a tendency to do very well. And then connecting with that emotional side, the energetic side, the spiritual side is where I step in there and combine all of those pieces. But letting them know that they're not alone, I think, is the biggest thing. And then the next thing after that is getting them to trust themselves. Because when it comes to connecting to your intuition, understanding the signals that are coming, not just ethereally, like, but through the
Just
physical.
kind of like,
No,
ooh,
it's
out
very
there in
much
the
connected to
ether.
the physical body. And so there's a lot of nervous system regulation work in that so that you can actually understand the signals that you're receiving so that you can navigate through the world easier. Because that's really the big part of this process. It is allowing you to navigate through the world from an authentic space. And that's the way you're really meant to move through the world. So even though the initial process is really difficult, it actually in the long run makes things a whole lot easier.
I think that's a very beautifully said answer. And I love that you have experience working with people in healthcare. You have clients who are surgeons. You know, I'm someone who follows you and found you at the time when I really needed to hear your messages, and I continue to do so. I love your podcast and I can't wait for your book. I just feel like, you know, whenever people are kind of out there in the world and wondering, like, is this intuition or is this my mind overthinking? How do you distinguish between the two? Because a lot of times I think we get so caught up in our thinking mind of plotting out the next steps and thinking we know what the outcome is going to be. But really, how do we hear that intuition that's inside?
Well, that's why I use meditation really heavily in my practice, because we need to create that space, the space between the analytical mind and what is actually you. Because when you can create that space, the signals, the messages, the knowing becomes a lot more obvious. But again, that takes meditating, that takes nervous system regulation. Because if you have somebody who's typically stuck in like a flight or fight stage, whether they present as that or not, the body's always kind of signaling. So it's really hard to understand what that's trying to say, because it's like there's just like a lot of noise. It's very clouded. And so meditation really helps pull the person back into their actual frequency to have those messages come through. Not all meditation will allow someone to do that, and it really depends on where they are in their journey as to whether they're doing like surface level meditations where they're just, you know, creating that little bit of space in the nervous system to reduce anxiety and those kinds of things. Because that's how I kind of walked into it. I did very light level meditations first, and that kind of opened me up. And but the ones that I prescribe, they allow the person to really activate their internalized antenna, balance out their energy centers, and then connect with their brain and their heart to make some energetic frequencies that create coherence.
I love that you mentioned coherence. And I think I'm from a field, and you're also from a field where people look for rigid evidence, right? Like if we can't prove it, we can't see it, then we think it's not real. But
at the same time, what's really interesting about that, and I think that's why like my PhD was so helpful, because I think we all kind of go into like higher education thinking that we're gonna, oh, the answers are here. We're gonna,
we got all the answers
yeah, we're gonna,
in the book.
they're in this book, they're in this journal that's gonna be really like clear and concise, and like now we'll know the question,
We
the answers
achieved
to the
mastery.
the big questions of the world, right? And then you get there and you realize there's just more questions.
So many more questions.
And when it came to nutrition, that in and of itself, there were so many questions because I was looking at studies where they were really highly controlled. Um, they're living in an environment where their calories, their movement, all of these things are really heavily controlled and monitored. And then you have people gaining weight and losing weight with no real physical, tangible reason as to why that is happening, why they're all over the map and they're not moving with that equation that we think is going to work. And what became very, very obvious to me is that there is a missing piece. We're not talking about energy. We're not talking about their thoughts, their feelings about these things. And that really propels a person's physical body in that space. And so going into the PhD and thinking that you're going to get all the answers to come out going, oh no, there's this whole space that nobody's even questioning right now, was really just quite the mind opener for me.
I had similar experience in the cath lab. I take care of patients who come in with heart attacks, and it's always unexpected, right? Nobody expects that they're going to have a heart attack in that moment. Yeah, we don't plan for it. We don't plan for it at 2 a.m. And I, treat the patients. And back then I was in a very different headspace. My understanding was in a different area, and it was more focused on the physicality, the 3D world. And I took care of a patient, for instance, 50-something-year-old man. We treated him for the heart attack, see him back in the office 3 months later. And I'm doing the happy dance because his ultrasound of the heart shows that his heart muscle function is normal, which is great after a heart attack. It means that what we did was actually effective. And I'm walking into the room wanting to tell him, like, hey, you're doing great. But the second I walked in, I just felt like this energetic disharmony. It just felt not good. And I didn't have the words for that. At that time, I didn't understand it, but I just felt like a really heavy energy in the room. And as I was delivering the information, it was like I expected them to be very euphoric and happy and excited. But really, I felt like there was still so much that needed to be addressed, but I just didn't have the toolkit to address it. And so, yes, we dealt with the physical manifestation, but what actually triggered that problem to happen and what is that internal disharmony that I was feeling that then resulted in that event. And so I started becoming interested in like, how do all of these things interact? The soul, the emotional body, the energetic body, all the things that we don't talk about in medical textbooks. Just because I can't prove them, does it mean that they're not real? Or is there a possibility that this is something that we need to talk about? So I'm curious on your thoughts on that.
Well, what's interesting is I have a whole section in my book that's coming out on that talks.
I found you.
Yeah, that talks about the anatomy of change and the energetic body, the physical body, the mental body, and the emotional body, and how they're all interconnected, and how we have to maintain and manage all of them in order to express ourselves in the highest aligned way, which also means physical health. And so they are all interconnected. And I think that that is really beautiful, the way that you were able to sense the energy in the room and understand that there is something much bigger going on there. And I think that you're probably going to be at the forefront of developing the language that will allow you to have conversations in a way that a lot of people aren't having right now when it comes to taking care of somebody and truly healing their heart, because that's such an energetic piece of who we are and connects us with who we really are away from this body. And so just taking care of the physicality of it, yes, that's a very, very important part. But we have these other places and spaces that we have to take care of as well in order to maintain that physical healing that happened.
And it also shows you that every single person is unique. There's no one size fits all for anything.
No, not a single thing.
Like, what do you tell people in the nutrition world? Like, people want to know what's the best diet, what's the best way to live forever. And for me, it's now a question of an individual person, what their life is like, what their emotional experiences have been, where their energy is. It's just there's so many different factors. How do you tell people what the right answer is for them, or should they know intuitively once they're presented with the tools?
Well, what was interesting, after I graduated, I did do intuitive eating coaching. And so I knew then that like moving away from like rigid prescriptions around nutrition and physical activity just wasn't going to work. And I think what's really interesting, even as I've learned with myself, is we have to learn to communicate with our body. You know, we are a soul in a physical vessel that has a level of sentience to it itself. And our job is to partner with it and to have conversations with it. And just like our soul needs different things at different times, our body needs different things at different times. So even if somebody may be on like a low carb diet and that's what they need right now, that may change later on, but you don't know that unless they're listening to the vessel that they're in and paying more attention and really slowing down to that, because I think it ebbs and flows and changes.
I think that's an important message, even in this medical healthcare world. I always tell patients, if something doesn't feel right in your body, it's not right. No matter what somebody else tells you, you have to make sure that you advocate for yourself, because that's your body telling you something. And I feel like that attunement to what's going on, we tell a lot of our patients, pay attention to your body, but then you think about healthcare workers and we're just so disconnected from ourselves, right? We're like busy and
You guys are
sleep
running a million
deprived.
miles a
Yeah.
minute. Yeah.
And there was a point where I was basically up every other night for months, and I started having like physical manifestations of that stress. But even more than that, I just couldn't calm my nervous system down to the point where I could really tap into my intuition. And at that point, I was just like, I don't feel safe showing up to do procedures unless I can rest more. And I think a lot of us run into that situation. And at that time, I didn't connect the two. I was just like, oh, I'm exhausted and I'm anxious because I'm exhausted. But I think it was actually more of an understanding of like, hey, I can't tap into my higher source or higher potential whenever I am not regulated myself. So what would you give as advice to people in healthcare? Because a lot of our audience is people in the medical world who are curious about this other way of thinking about things, about expanding our view of what it means to heal. Do you have any advice for the healthcare worker who's struggling to do all the things we tell our patients?
You've got to take care of yourself first. Because the thing is like, you guys are touching people consistently. And so the impact of your energy on them is higher than a lot of other people. But you have to take care of yourself, because there also needs to be like an entire like energetic hygiene practice involved as well, because you're picking up things. They're all picking up things. And so as you're helping people who are sick and are in a lower vibration than they normally would be, like that is also pulling you down as you help as well. And like a lot of practitioners do that, whether it's a physical medical doctor or an energy worker. Like we all sacrifice some of our own energy in order to help everyone lift up. But it's really important that you take care of yourself, that you get enough rest, that you regulate your nervous system, calm your mind, and really tap into yourself, because the calmer and more centered you are, the more you're able to easily move through the requirements and responsibilities that you have that are a heavy weight.
I think that's such an important message for people in my community. And I feel like, and I mentioned this to you before we even started recording, how I didn't even know what an energy center was before I quit my corporate job in medicine, went to yoga teacher training in Costa Rica, and here I am in the jungle and somebody tells me, oh, the body has energy centers. And I was like, wait, what is that?
Yeah, why didn't we discuss that earlier?
Why didn't we chat about this sooner? And the next thing I know, my mind was just drawn to it. I was like, something about this concept resonates. Let me dig into it deeper. And then I started studying about Reiki and other forms of energy work in different traditions. And I'm like, is it possible that this is actually real and not everybody in this space is just kind of, it's not just making stuff up, right? And it's ancient traditions that have been passed down for many, many generations. But I think with that very scientific mind, I was very much a skeptic until I started kind of understanding energy in a different sense, in a way that I could relate to it. And so that for me was like going back to my experiences in the cath lab. What was it whenever I had like the goosebumps before I took a patient back to the cath lab and I can feel how sick somebody's going to be, or if I anticipated like I need to do something differently here, or I need to stop here, that gut feeling, that clinical intuition, could that be the energy body?
Oh, absolutely. Because the thing is like you are not just the physical body. Like, so yeah, we have our hands, we can reach out and touch things, but your energy reaches out and touches things. And so when you sense how sick somebody is and you intuitively move through that process, that's your energy moving through. And what is interesting is I think that the ancient knowledge of these other pieces of who we are um, has been fragmented from us in a lot of ways. Like they're not interconnected. Like this is over here, this is the spiritual woo-woo side of us, and this is the physical side. When really like we accomplish health in a much more aligned way if we combine them all. And what's cool, I think, is that there is a lot of technology in like the physics department that is starting to measure these things. And so it's not woo woo, it is getting validated. Like quantum entanglement won the Nobel Peace Prize. Like these aren't things that are as fringe as they used to be. And I think at one point they weren't fringe at all. I think it was common knowledge, and then we got separated from it along the way. And now we're going back to that.
I think you're 100% spot on with all of that. And we talk a lot about energy and vibration. Can you tell the audience a little bit about these vibrational states? And I would also love to hear a little bit more about quantum healing, quantum activation, some of the work that you do in regards to energy, vibration, all the different things.
Yeah, so when it comes to energy, I think it's important that we look at vibration and frequency different. Vibration is more of an emotional range. So you can have like a low vibrational day and still have a very high frequency to who you are. And I think it's important to differentiate between those two, because a lot of times people get confused when they're sad or unhappy or they have a rough day. There's this like spiritual bypassing component that happens in the narrative a lot, that like, oh, in order to get to where you want, you have to be high vibrational all the time. And you can have a bad day and still have a very high frequency. And I think that that's important. So vibration runs in a band of emotion more so than like your unique signature is more of a frequency that is just dialed into you and you alone.
Where does that come from?
Source. We're all, as far as I see it and the information that I've been shown, we're all unique fractals of source. So we are one while also being separate, in the sense that each one of us is so unique. We each experience the world in a unique manner. And that unique expression allows source to have all of these experiences and understand what it is to live and exist and be. And so we're awakening, but we're also expanding source consciousness while we do that.
Wow. So it really is that we're all made of the same stuff.
Oh, yeah.
I love that concept. And it's something that I actually learned really early in life. So I come from an Indian family. We spent a lot of time in India, and I used to think this was totally normal as an experience for people in the world. But my mom would take us to this holy village in India every single summer. And we would wake up at like 4 a.m. to sit in the sand and meditate before we went and did the prayers and the mantras and all the different things. And I learned a lot about these concepts of how we are all fragments of one greater source, and how words can hold a certain vibration, the way that you chant, the harmony of that, the tone, all the different things that you use in sound can actually shift the vibration of the entire collective. And I got exposed to all these really big concepts, but then as I went through life, I kind of moved away from it. I was like, oh, I can't prove it. It's not real. And now I've kind of come back to it full circle. And my question to you is, I feel that people come into our lives at certain times, and especially people who are wise teachers or mentors. And, I've sought out people that I've had help me along the way as I've gone through the early part of this experience. What is a quantum activator?
It took me a long time to figure that out. In the sense that, I think we all go through these periods of trying to figure out who we are. And that was a phrase that kept reappearing. And it was one of those things that I was like, well, there's no box for that, Claudia. Like, if you're telling people you're a quantum activator, like, what does that mean? There's no LinkedIn for that. You know what I mean? Like, people don't understand what that is right off the bat. but it wouldn't go away. And so that's how I knew, like, no, this is sticking around. And so how I see it and how it works is some of us have the ability to initiate the trajectory of change in somebody by simply being present, allowing our frequency to be present, and allow ourselves to pull through really large versions of our own energy, I think is the best way to put it, because when you're really like connected into your authenticity, you're really pulling in that frequency of who you are outside of this realm. And so what I do is when I meet with clients, when people use my meditations, there's a frequency present that shifts something. And you can see it in like epigenetics, like depending on what you're exposed to will turn on and off genes. And so when I visually see the picture of what that is, it's when someone's exposed to that particular frequency of me, it shifts and changes something in them that allows them to move closer to themselves. And so that's what I see as a quantum activator, because it's not something that's done in the physical space. It is done in the energetic space. And that quantum space where there's entanglement and energy that moves through a web of consciousness that I'm not sure our brains will ever be able to fully comprehend the complexity of that. That term allows me to explain all of that in a 2-word
I just
description.
I love everything that you just said. And I also love how your messages, and this is how I actually found you, your messages are always prefaced with, there are no, hashtags, or there's no way that this message will reach you unless you actually need to hear it. And so my question about quantum activation is, do people come to you at a time when they're ready for that? Is it kind of like you're drawn to that resonance, or can it work for literally anybody? Like I just pull up my phone and I'm like, hey, watch this. Or are they innately ready for it, and that's why they're being presented with that opportunity?
That phrase, if this finds you, it is meant for you. Like that, I mean that with everything, because I don't fully have a conscious understanding of how things find people.
It's working.
Thank you. But that's not my job. Like that's the biggest part of it, is like my job is to express the truths that are channeled through me, and it's Source's job to deliver those to whoever is meant to hear it. And some people will be like, oh my God, I'm all in, I need this huge change. And some people, like, that will just shift like a little bit that then sends them on their trajectory to wherever they're meant to be. And so I think it can reach all kinds of levels, but the level of impact that person feels that I personally provide is going to be really dependent on the individual, their soul, where they are in their journey, their energy, all of those things.
You bring up a really good point also about this ripple effect. I think we can very much put out whatever it is that authentically comes through us and feels like it's in alignment, but we may not ever know the full extent of the ripple.
I don't think we ever will. And it still surprises me to this day, the level of impact. I'm not going to say it surprises me, but it's humbling to read the messages from people of the impact that I had no idea like I was able to provide them. And that's what's mind-blowing to me enough, because like the thing is like I'm not doing anything other than I'm being myself and being asked to present as who I am with my gifts. And so there's no strategy to that. And it's really beautiful that Source allows us to make such an impact in people's lives by simply connecting with who we are more.
I really admire your humility in all of this, because I think, when the things that you do are actually really challenging, I think trusting in that process and even showing up authentically, those are such hard things to do. And I'm in the very, very early stages of kind of like peeling back layer by layer by layer. And I do kind of, sometimes things will come through, and very much this podcast is very guided. It feels divinely guided. It feels almost like it's coming through me rather than me creating something. And sometimes I like things will pop in and I'm like, oh my gosh, can I say that? Like, is that something I can say? But it's like it comes through for a reason, right? So how did you deepen your trust in that? Because I actually want to know for myself, and I know
I
our
jumped off a
audience.
cliff of terror and just
So
did
we're
it.
just gonna
Like,
go.
so that's kind of like my connection to the energy of faith is incredibly strong. I think if I look at my life and I have an honest look at it compared to probably most people, I'm required to jump off of these blind cliffs a lot and really strengthen that. Oh, source said me, I'm going to do it and it's everything's going to work out. This feels like it's in alignment and going for it. And my ability to do that allows me to sit in an energy where I can look at somebody else and what they're about to bunny trail themselves through and go, you're totally fine. There's the, you've got this. Keep going. Like, that's the energy of it right there. Like, you've got this. You can do this. You just have to keep walking. And like, that's been a huge part of my life that has like pulled me forward. But I mean, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It was absolutely
It's
terrifying.
so scary.
Like I like it was terrifying putting out that first channeled message and then continuing to do it when like people in my actual life started to see them and they were like, what are you doing? What what happened to you? Like, didn't
Oh my gosh.
you went to school for 10 years. Now you're talking to spirits? Like, what is happening over here? Like, there was a real window of a period of time where it was like everyone thought I was moving in the wrong direction, but I knew there was no other direction that I could move. And so I just kept doing it.
And that trust comes from deep within you, right? It's
Yeah, because that's part of that dark forest we all have to walk through. That going, okay, I know that this is the direction, and nothing outside of me can tell me where I actually need to walk. And so that faith and that trust is like the biggest thing.
so much power in that message. And as you were talking, my mentor popped into my mind. I love this person. He has created so much space and opportunity for me, and was one of the first persons I told, or first person. He was the first person I told about some of the big changes that I made in my life. And I was so shocked when he said, just listen to your heart and do what feels right and do what makes you happy. I did not expect that from this person who's the chief of cardiology at a big academic program and has done more procedures than probably most proceduralists in the world. But he was just like, you have to listen and live in alignment. And I felt like I kept running into people who kind of affirmed that for me when I didn't believe it myself. And hearing your messages and your story, it's just so powerful. And I know it's going to help whoever it needs to help. Because the messages
they will find who they're meant to find.
Woo-hoo!
For sure.
We talked a little bit about like neuroplasticity, epigenetics, all the trendy words that people kind of use. I wanted to bring it back to like something very, very simple. You had a podcast episode about the power of words. I think that is a brilliant place to start, because I think a lot of these other concepts can get so overwhelming for people. And it's even like breaking it down further into this very fundamental level of every thought you think, every word you use, they actually have an impact in the way that you express in the world.
Yeah. So words contain frequency, and the meaning of words matters. When we simplify it down to things like thought forms and belief structures, a lot of times that's really the first place that we have to go with people who want to change but are very stuck in the analytical mind. Because when you're stuck in the analytical mind, shifting those thoughts and beliefs really is how they access more of their energy. And so we have to start there. And so getting someone to gain an awareness on the things that they say to themselves all day long is the first place that we have to start. Because it's defining what you think about yourself. And basically, when you are sharing things with yourself and others that are a lower vibration, a lower frequency than who you actually are, what you're saying is, I don't trust who I actually am. I don't trust that my soul is good enough. And so shifting the thought pattern and the words that are used changes how somebody presents, because it opens up the doorway to allow more of their own energy in. It's like when we talk about the matrix, like the matrix is really thought forms and belief structures that are relaying physical structures in the body. We know neural networks, the more you repeat something over and over, the more myelin goes over it, the more physical it becomes. And so that initial like leap with faith for someone to move into a new place and space with themselves requires breaking down those physical networks and shifting and changing them. And words have the capability to do that.
That is so powerful. And so it even translates into the things that we consume, right? It's like, what do we listen to whenever we're driving to work? What's playing on our radio? What kind of shows are we listening to? What's playing on the TV in the background? All of those things matter.
Yeah, when you start to wake up, you start to realize, oh, I've been playing this really popular song over and over again, and this is making me sad. Like, like it matters. Like, and so.
And I guess on the flip side, those like really uplifting, powerful words and songs and the things that we use to kind of raise our vibration, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, there's an equal and opposite to everything. Yeah. And so it's what we pay attention to is what develops our experience. And so when we're paying attention to things that like pull us down, we're going to continue to be pulled down. But when we pay attention to the things that lift us up, we continue to spiral upward.
I think it's super important for all people to know that, right? And I think we're all going through this human experience. And I love that earlier in our conversation, you talked about us as an energetic being or soul in a physical form. And I think once we start to look at it like that, it actually changes like how we interact with the world around us in such a beautiful way. I'm actually so curious. Is there anything from your book that you can share with us that you feel like would be a really important?
I mean, the whole book. So.
Yeah. When does it come out?
It comes out April of 2026. So I actually just turned in all my copy edits. So.
Amazing. Congratulations. And is there anything from your book or otherwise that you really feel like the audience needs to hear?
I think the biggest thing is understanding that you're always exactly where you're meant to be. So wherever you are in this process of awakening and understanding yourself and understanding your purpose and how you're meant to move through the world, let go of any guilt and shame about not doing it fast enough, not doing it with enough gusto, making mistakes and not listening to your intuition, because like all of those things are purposeful and all of those things you're meant to experience. Because while we have the opportunity to make different decisions, a lot of our lives do have these fated points, and you're meant to move in a certain progression because everything is connected and it's so complex that we don't understand. You opened up when you opened up and I opened up when I opened up, and now we're sitting in front of each other having this conversation. Like all of that was like a domino effect of certain things. And so people need to understand that be okay with where you are, and you're going to move through it in the pace that you're meant to. And it will be the most beautiful experience that's designed exactly for you and no one else.
Beautiful message, as always. And I really do feel like a lot of the experiences I've had in the recent past have been very much based on resonance and alignment. It's like once I kind of shifted into this more flow state of trusting and understanding like the yes in the body versus the no in the body and kind of moving with that understanding, it's like the doors just open to this beautiful life experience. And I'm like, where did this come from? And I think back to where I was a year and a half ago, and I'm just so thankful, even though the ride was bumpy and it was scary. And it's like you're walking into this unpredictable unknown. It still feels like it is just a beautiful journey that's unfolding. And I've been lucky because I feel like I see a lot of the things that help me. And I know everybody does in their journey, but for me, it's synchronicity. I see a lot of angel numbers. And I feel like whenever I start to have a little bit of that doubt, I have something that comes into my life with reassurance. And so what does your reassurance look like? What do you get anything that kind of tells you like, hey, I'm on the right track?
License plate that said magic on the way here.
Woohoo!
So I think synchronicity is really, really, I see it as like high fives from the guides. Like, so when you need that confirmation that you're on the right track, like a lot of the stuff isn't like really deep, like realizations. It's like, hey, you're still on the right track. Hey, you're still on the right. Hey, you might want to turn left instead of turning right when those kind of things pop up. And it's about learning to read those things in a way that's meaningful to you. So yeah, I get all kinds of signs and synchronicities.
What's the silliest sign that you've ever gotten?
Oh God, there's so many. I've got my guides. I've got a good sense of humor, so there are a lot. Like a very sarcastic sense of humor, and so I get a lot of signs and synchronicities that are like that. Yeah, and then I'm clairaudient, so I hear the laughing. After I get the signs.
You have to tell us more about these clairs, because I think a lot of our audience has probably never heard of any of the clairs. Do you mind kind of going through some of that stuff?
Yeah, so there's I don't remember how many was there, 5, 6? I don't know.
It's like the clairsentience, clairaudience.
It's basically senses, right? Like you have hearing, you have sight, you have taste, you have sound, you have all of these things. And so one of the first ones for me to really come in and was very loud is the clairaudience, which means I can hear the guides. It's like,
what do they sound like?
It depends. They all have different voices and things like that.
And we have many guides, right? So it's not just one guide. It's often a team of spiritual help.
It's like your team, your soul family that works with you. And they present in all kinds of ways, places, and spaces. And I know for the research-based audience, this is not clinically proven.
I too have a team of guides. I very much believe in that.
So it's just depending on like the dimensional space that they come through, like because like they're multi-dimensional, so they exist in a lot of places and spaces, and they can have a tendency to present in different ways and shapes and voices from those places and spaces. And initially, like people that have clairaudience, it can be really confusing because initially, like when you don't have your gift honed and tuned in, it can sound a lot like you, so it can get really confusing at first. You're like, oh, that's not me, but it sounds like me in my head because you don't have the ability to differentiate the vibrational frequencies of these guides. But yeah, so it sounds like now at this point, with the way it's developed, it sounds like a conversation. And it's paying attention to direction and all kinds of things. And then you have the clairsentience where you have that knowing and feeling in the body. And then the clairvoyance is more like pictures. And so initially I didn't think I had that ability. And I was talking with somebody who has it. And I was describing what I was experiencing. And she's like, no, that's it. Because I thought
for everyone.
Clairvoyance was like looking at you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh, well, I don't see them all standing here.
Where are you
right?
guys?
But it's more of a transparency. Like, so if you were going to use like the Canva program and you're going to change the transparency on a document, it goes from like 0 to 100. So you can like see through things.
What a cool descriptor.
Yeah, that
makes a lot of sense.
Turn down the transparency
Yeah.
on it. And so like you're seeing through the image. And so once I figured that out, that got a lot stronger. And so I see like pictures and like little like movie clips and things like that.
Do things ever just drop in when you're out at the grocery store or you're kind of just going about your day? Or is it like you have to be really tuned in and intentional about wanting to connect?
Initially, I think you have to be I think you need to pay attention because initially when you don't understand the gift and you don't understand the frequencies that you're working with, there can be a lot of discernment issues.
Discernment is such an important word.
Yeah. Because the thing is like once you open yourself up, you can hear a lot of things. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you want to hear all of the things. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're not, they don't have intentions that aren't of the highest good. And so you do have to really hone that ability initially. And I think a lot of people, when they first open up, they come out and they're like baby deers with wobbly legs and they're trying to learn how to walk and they let everything in, and that's when it gets really confusing, and it can get scary at that point when they don't have anyone to talk to about it, to really understand what is going on in those places and spaces.
And you mentioned that, just going through this experience, like these skills or these gifts kind of develop over time, and everybody has access to them, right? We all have all the clairs, but to varying degrees of connection and development and ability. Is that kind of the right way of looking
Yeah, it's
at
like
it?
everybody has a unique flavor
Yeah.
that is theirs, that is uniquely theirs. So
Like I
it's
tend
not,
to feel more. I have more of that clairsentience kind of
yeah, it's not an all
feeling.
or nothing situation. It is a combination of all of it. Because even though some people may not be able to hear external guides, they can hear their higher self. And it's about quieting the analytical mind enough to really discern what that voice is saying.
And to trust, right? I think the trust is such a hard part of it. And I didn't know what a spirit team, what a spirit guide was until a year ago. And when I first heard about it, I was just kind of like, interesting. And as I have gone through this journey over the last year, I'm like, I definitely have a team. And they're actually quite silly and fun and interesting. And I feel very much supported. And
Perfect for you.
they're perfect for us, right? And I made it a ritual of asking and communicating with them more. I work with a psychic intuitive coach who's a very good friend of mine, who's going to be on the season of the podcast. And she and I have worked together very closely for the last year, and she's been a really important part of my journey. And she told me they want you to talk to them. They want you to communicate with them. And I didn't even know that was a thing. I was just like, what do I do? Like, say hello? And she was like, no, talk to them. Tell them angels and guides of the highest compassion with the, the intentions that we want. Just communicate with them. And so I kind of have like a mental dialogue with them. And I'm like, hey, just wanted to communicate with you that. And I started also tuning into the sensations that I get. I'm like, okay, what's a yes in my body? And it's something that I learned by working with an integrative healer, also another person who's been a very important part of my journey, also on season 1. And she and I kind of talk through, how does intuition show up in your body? And for me, it's like a yes is this warmth in my chest. It's like this warm, expansive feeling in the chest. And a no is this tightening in my stomach. And prior to that, I lived with the constant tightness in my stomach until I learned to regulate the nervous system and to kind of tune in more to these subtle body cues. And now it's like my compass. If I feel that tightening, I'm just immediately just like, I need to pause here. There's something that's not quite right. And when I feel that warm yes, it's just like, go for it, even if it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, that's exactly how you should move through the world, right? Like that's why we have these senses and these connections, because it helps us move through easier with less resistance.
And so having a conversation with your spirit guides is normal.
Yeah.
Cool.
It should be. Can we normalize it?
Can we please normalize this?
Please normalize it. I have full-blown conversations. Like,
a lot of us actually do this in our mind, and people believe in different things, and I think it's totally fine to have whatever set of beliefs, but I think a lot of us are talking about the same exact thing. Some people will have like a quiet prayer or a whisper as they're walking in before they go in to take care of a patient who's having a heart attack. I used to have this internal dialogue of just like wishing something good to happen, like just an intention of like doing good or just being able to deliver what needs to be delivered in the space, and with the intention of bringing the greatest amount of joy, the least amount of pain as possible. And I was doing that even before I knew any of this stuff. So I almost feel like we all have that internal practice without really understanding that it actually does connect us with something greater.
well, I think when you go fully through a couple layers of an awakening, you realize that it's not about you becoming anything different. It is just remembering what has always been there. And so that is a very accurate statement. You knew you needed to set the intention. You knew the intention made a difference, even though your analytical mind had no recognition of that. Like, it was something you just automatically did. And even as like my gifts opened up, a lot of the things that I have the analytical understanding on now, I was always doing. It was always there. It was just about uncovering it and understanding it. And that allows more of that authentic energy of yourself, of your higher self, to come in, and it actually allows you to embody it in this lifetime versus feeling separate from it.
Can you tell us what a higher self is for people in the audience who may have never heard that term?
So I use higher self and authentic self kind of interchangeably because the language is used pretty frequently in the spiritual community, and interchanging it is not an issue. But I lean towards authentic self more than higher self a lot of the time, because higher self, when we say higher, a lot of people can interpret that as they're not good enough or there's something separate from them that they don't already have, where the term higher really only means like that's the full-bodied frequency, like that's a very high vibrational frequency.
So it's the fullest expression of who we were meant to be.
Well, who you are, not meant to be, who
we are.
Who you are.
Yeah.
Because who you are is not limited to this particular lifetime. So the higher self is the soul, right? That's the full expression of you. And because it's in a much higher vibrational energy, we feel disconnected from it in these bodies because these bodies are very dense, like they're solid matter. They have a tangibleness to them that the soul doesn't necessarily have. And so the frequency of the body is lower than the frequency of the soul, and it's about moving them, toggling them so that you can embody all that you are while you're here.
What a cool way to live, right? To have that awareness and understanding and openness to be able to then shift and be the full expression of who we are.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's
so cool.
It's an adventure.
What an adventure it is. And it's also like we reinvent ourselves so many times in a single lifetime. And I'm actually curious about that. And I actually have never asked a guest these questions, but I am curious about, what do you believe happens to people after they die? Because I deal with a lot of life and death. And when we think about the soul as going through all of these experiences and, what do you think happens to the soul?
The soul's the same. And the soul moves out of the body, but that doesn't change the soul. I think there's a lot of interpretations of what happens after the soul leaves the body. I've seen channeling and hypnosis clients and testimonials and things and books from people that do the quantum hypnosis about what happens after, regarding things like life reviews and healing and those kinds of things when you integrate the lessons that you've learned in this life. And to be honest, I haven't spent a lot of time tapping into that because for whatever reason, I've never really been concerned about what happens.
And some of it is meant to be the mystery, right? It's like the great mystery of going through life, the great mystery of after we pass from this physical form.
Right. Yeah. And I think you're not going to know until you experience it fully. And we all experience, it's something that you're not going to evade, but I don't think it's as finite as it appears on this planet.
Yeah.
And I can say that because I've seen souls reincarnate. I have animals that their soul returns to me every single time. I see the energy. I see who they are. I can tell they're the same, and they're
So
just
does
in
the
a
energy
different
signature
body.
feel the same?
Oh, it's the exact same.
Wow. So you
The
recognize
behavior,
the
the
energy.
mechanisms,
Yeah.
all of the things are the same. The relationship is the same. That's my friend, And so I don't think things change as much as the humanness thinks it changes.
I have to share the story from a patient who came in with a cardiac arrest. And this is somebody that I treated in the cath lab with my team. And he recovered, did really well. But I never ask patients, like, what did you go through? Because I just feel like there's a lot of PTSD, and if they wanted to share, they would. And this one in particular, and actually a serial, 3 of them that happened kind of subsequently in order, told me a similar story of walking toward this really like beautiful energy. It was like a warm light, and they felt like they had so much love around them, and they recognized some people, they didn't recognize others, but it was all very loving. And he was greeted by someone he recognized who brought him back and said, "Hey, it's not your time yet, but we're here for you." And then he woke up. And I heard that story from so many different patients where I'm just kind of like, wow, what a beautiful mystery that life is. And it just kind of shows you that, we're not alone. I don't think that we're ever alone in that way.
No, and I feel like it's like going home.
Yeah.
Like this is home for now, but this is also a place and space that is very, like, it's got a lot of dense energy. And this is one of the harder places to be. This is one of the more difficult places to navigate. And so I think we come out of it with a lot of growth and understanding of what it is to exist on a whole lot of different spectrums and levels.
I think the fundamental purpose of the life experience almost feels like we're just here to embody love and experience the full spectrum of emotion.
Yeah, because the thing is the deeper you go, the higher you can go. It's like the roots of a tree. Like if you are only going to a shallow depth of pain, then what you feel directly opposite of that is also going to be shallow. Because when you have the depth of experience of going through some really, really hard things and overcoming that allows you to have that container that's expanded that can take in those higher vibrational experiences and emotions.
I think it's really beautiful how you're able to hold space for others. And I know that's a part of your role in this quantum activation type of work. I also wonder, like, people in the healing space and other forms, like people that are at a cath lab table, people that are in an OR, it's almost like holding space is actually a really important part of the job that we do. And so it really is a valuable lesson that we can learn from people like you who intentionally set the container and create space for healing. And it's almost like we have to meet them at a certain vibration, right? To raise or elevate the vibration of to healing.
Yes, and I think you don't have to be in a healing modality to hold space and to help somebody heal, because there are so many things that I think of that synchronistically happen in my life or that someone shares with me, that it really is those small moments of like just smiling at somebody or being gentle when somebody's clearly having a difficult time, or taking a deep breath when somebody in traffic makes you mad. Like those kinds of things shift the collective as a whole, and all of them add up. And I think that's what's really beautiful about Source, that like, yes, we can have these big experiences where we shift a lot of energy and we change massively, but it's in the gratitude for it that seemingly seems like a small thing to do that has the biggest impact. And so like the smallest things have a big trajectory on changing somebody's path towards their own energy and authenticity and feeling safe in themselves. So yes, those that are specifically in work environments that like create the opportunity for healing, holding space is a big part of that. But carrying that everywhere we go, and for the people that aren't in those spaces, there's an equal amount of opportunity for them to help somebody heal. Because I know a lot of people that I work with that are like the beginning stages of an awakening, they're like, oh, I've got to give up my whole life.
Yeah.
I can't be a lawyer anymore. I can't do the things,
I can't live in a house. I have to live outside
yeah,
with the earth.
I've got to go get a yoga certification, and
Which I did. And I'm like, wow.
I've all gone down these roads, right?
It's like we're searching, we're like seeking, and it's all
I
here.
lived in Bali for a month, so I get it. Like, you got to go do whatever the thing that's calling you to go do. but you also don't have to upend everything. Most I would say most people don't have to like completely turn their lives upside down to have a very large awakening and help others. Because when you think about it, we need people in every nook and cranny of existence that are aware, that are wanting to heal, wanting to connect more with themselves, wanting to connect more with others. And we need that in every area, place, and space.
I think very powerful message. And my big question for you as a takeaway for our audience is, how do we implement all of these big concepts that we talked about? You know, we talk about quantum activation, we talk about spiritual awakening, we talk about the words that we use and how that shifts everything in our bodies, our physical body, the epigenetics, our neuroplasticity. We talk about a lot of really big topics. What is one simple message that you really want the audience to take home, a simple message or a practice that you think is very important for our listeners?
Take the time to breathe. I think we all forget to do that. And when you take just a minute to really focus on your breath and slow down, you pull yourself back into your energy. And when you pull yourself back into your energy, you have the capacity to move from a more aligned space. Like the answer to whether you should turn left or right will be more obvious. And a lot of times we're moving so fast and we need to slow down, because we'll actually get to where we want to go faster if we just slow down.
And giving ourselves the permission to slow down in a world that feels like we have to keep racing. Actually, I still have one more question. Because I just cannot believe you're here in the flesh. And, you know, I'm honored that you'd even come
in
here.
real life.
In real life. I'm honored that you come here, because I really found you on social media because your messages resonated so deeply with me over the last year. And I thought, okay, I'm just going to sit there and type a little message like, hello, it's me. I really like your messages. Can you be on my podcast? And here we are.
But I think that is like quite the testament to everybody listening, that when you feel the nudge to do something that feels aligned and you let go of the expectation, whatever's meant to be is going to move in that alignment. Because I saw your message and I was like, that feels right to move towards. Like, she feels great. I like her energy. She feels like she's in an aligned energy that I would want to walk towards. And so that's why I agreed to come here. That's how I move with everything. And so taking those aligned actions, because messaging was an aligned action. And I think a lot of people second guess those things. Oh, you know, they're not going to respond, or they're not going to do this, or all of those things. And like, if we just move from that alignment, everything naturally unfolds exactly the way it should.
That's a powerful message in and of itself. And my question for you is about authenticity. Why is authenticity so important in our world right now?
That's a big question. Because it's super important. This really is the era of authenticity. Like the next 100 years, it's going to be, let's just say like the next 5 years, it's going to be so incredibly obvious that the things that are held up by an energy that is not from authenticity is going to dissolve in a way that we have never seen in our lifetime before. And so accessing who you are, your energy, is how you're going to be able to navigate these new places and spaces and this unknown space in a way that's within your true alignment. And so the authenticity is you connecting with your soul. That is who you are. And that naturally draws in the people, places, and spaces that you're meant to be around and flourish in a way. Like, this is an abundant space. This isn't, authenticity isn't selfish, because when you stand in your authenticity, that is a very high frequency energy, and that encourages others to do the same. It encourages people to walk in a place and space where they go, okay, it's scary to be myself. It's scary to speak how I feel. It's scary to share what I'm really going through, but I'm going to do it because I feel the energy that it's safe to do so.
That's beautiful. And I'm so excited for our whole audience to hear that message, especially the people in the medical world, because I think there is a lot of fear about expressing who you really are. And a lot of times we feel like we're kind of put into these very tightly constrained boxes, and we weren't meant to be in boxes. I think we were here to fully express who we are. And those gifts ripple out into the world in ways that we can't even imagine. And I love this message so much. So authenticity is the right answer, I believe also.
Absolutely. And especially from the medical perspective, there are so many with gifts that they've just barely scratched the surface because they're using them physically, but they're not completely connected in. And I think we're going to see medicine change in a really beautiful way that allows us to navigate places and spaces from a higher aligned energy overall, where there's a lot less sickness physically, mentally, emotionally, and energetically.
That would be a dream world. And I will say some of my very first experiences of people that have tapped into these gifts have been in healthcare spaces. I know a cath lab nurse whose intuition is incredibly sharp. And now, 10 years after I met her, I'm like, okay, so that time that you knew that thing, I think it's actually intuition. And she's like, yeah, it's been that for a long time. But I think we all have varying levels of it. It's like even just having this conversation, I think it starts to kind of take out the layers of I don't want to call it secrecy or silence. I think it's just more the complexity of navigating a very physical world. It's kind of like slowly expanding our awareness in a way that the people who hear this and say, hey, it resonates, that's great, but it's also not meant to force anyone. I feel like people kind of evolve in their own journey and there's no right or wrong way of being. But I just think it's so cool to like have this conversation because I, as an interventional cardiologist, totally believe in all the stuff.
Well, the funny thing is like from a medical perspective, like we understand that the physical eye can only see so much of the spectrum of light. We understand that there's things that our physical eye cannot see. And so why is it so hard for us to accept that our brain can't fully see everything that this world holds?
Yeah.
You know? And I just think that like we believe in Wi-Fi. You cannot
Can I
see
see it?
Wi-Fi. Like you're getting this on your phone or your TV or whatever, and like it flew in invisible packets into your TV or your phone, like, and you're okay with that. Like we need to just expand that and remove that contraction around the soul piece, because I do believe that we were very connected with it at one point and then became disconnected, and then I think we're going to have this like whole new combination of connectedness that we haven't seen before.
I don't think I told you this, but the tagline for the podcast is it's where science meets soul. And it's like a little like synergy. And I really do feel like, you know, we're heading in that direction. There's so much ancient ancestral wisdom that is so similar across traditions that could not have exchanged information. And these traditions are so deeply rooted in connection with the soul, with nature, with each other, with community. And there's so much depth there. And I feel like we're kind of slowly making our way back to a more integrated approach. And I think we've done beautiful things in physical medicine. I think the developments in medicine, procedures, technology, all of the life-saving things that we have, it's incredible, but I don't think it's all of it. And so I really am excited for a this and that world rather than a this or that kind of world.
Yeah, it's both and.
Yeah. Well, my final question for you would be, what does living with an open heart mean to you? I know I keep giving you really tough questions.
I think living with an open heart is allowing yourself to express yourself without judgment and allowing yourself to move through life without expectation of who you should be or what you should want, and really feeling into your experience, because when you feel into your experience, you can feel who you are, even if it doesn't have an analytical like description or all of the things that like the analytical mind wants to like, oh, well, you do this, you drive this car, you live here, all of those things. When you actually move into who like you're feeling, you tap into an unconditional love that allows you to move from a place and space where you don't have any fear. Like, you understand that everything is always working out. You're always supported. You're never alone. And you keep moving forward from that space, and it creates more love and it creates more beauty in the world.
It's like full body goosebumps. Thank you so much, Claudia. It means so much that you're here.
Thank you for
and,
having me.
Like,
and
I could,
having the guts to reach out.
I could literally talk to you for days. I just want to hear so many of the different things. And I know we're going to have a conversation again. I just know it's going to happen.
Yeah, absolutely.